Happy Monday, everybody. We're back here today for another episode of the Lions Grid. Today's episode, we'll be talking about the outcome of yesterday's game between the Detroit Lions, who hosted the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, the Cowboys getting the 35-27 win at the end of the day. We talked about it on Sunday before the game started that, it was pretty much the Cowboys' game to lose, and had they lost, I thought, it could finally be the straw that broke the camel's back there in Dallas, and Jason Garrett should finally be let go as the head coach. The Cowboys seemingly did a lot to try and make it look like they could lose that game to the Lions. They did end up securing the win, so Jason Garrett's job should be safe there, but it was looking dangerous there for a while. I thought for a little while there that it might be a missed opportunity for the Cowboys and that the Lions somehow might have pulled that out. Of course, the thing that stopped them from pulling out that game was the Lions' defense. The Lions' defense was bad. I'll take a moment before we start talking about the bad stuff. We'll focus on the good here to start the episode. And I really am surprised by how well the offense and Jeff Driscoll played. The Cowboys' defense typically is one of the, they're considered a decent defense. They have been looking to upgrade at the safety position. They do have Joe Heath back there as one of their safeties, but they have been looking to sort of upgrade there in recent years. There's been some talk about, what was it, the previous year was Ed Thomas. This year people wanted them to go and trade for Adams from the Jets. People aren't happy with the state of their secondary, in particular those safeties. But overall, I would say that their defense is pretty good, but we still scored 27. And as the thumbnail would suggest, in most situations, you'd think putting up 27 points would give you a pretty good chance to win a game. But unfortunately, despite the Lions' offense best efforts, it was not a win. And again, it's not really surprising. Obviously, with Matt Stafford being out for the second game, he's been out the last 2 weeks, and potentially we'll talk about a little further what his future might look like with the Lions in terms of this season. But it's not surprising that a Lions team without Matt Stafford would lose to the Cowboys. The Cowboys are supposed to be one of the best teams in the NFC, currently in first place in the NFC East, and the Lions currently sit in last place in the NFC North and are without their franchise quarterback. So it's not a surprise what the outcome of the game was. I like I said though, I am surprised about how well the offense did perform. I think it speaks to Darrell Bevell in particular on this coaching staff. I think what he's done, you look at the last couple of seasons and the struggles that Jim Bob Cooter and the Lions offense had with him here. The fact that you can lose your franchise quarterback and still put up 27 points. They did get lucky. They had they forced the fumble on Ezekiel Elliott, and sort of, turnovers. You can do all the right things, be putting yourself in the right places, doing the things to get turnovers. But there's a little bit of luck involved there. Overall, I think they capitalized, the offense did, on their chances. They made it a very interesting game for most of the game against the Cowboys, and certainly applied pressure. The part that let the team down was that defense. The defense looked awful, and they've been taking that approach where they've been that bend don't break defense, and it hasn't worked out. At the end of the game, they gave up 21 first downs. They gave up 509 yards on 71 plays. 7.2 yards per play. It's not going to work out. It's really hard to win games in the NFL if you're giving up that many yards, because at that point you've bent to the point where the floodgates are open and just the other team is having their way with you, and that's what happened. I mean, the Cowboys had if you had a Cowboy on your fantasy team, you were probably coming out pretty happy. Of course, I had Amari Cooper. I wish he would have got a little more involved. But Dak threw for 440 yards, 3 touchdowns. Zeke didn't do a whole lot in terms of his yardage. He did score the 1 rushing touchdown, and he did catch another touchdown out of the backfield. So he did chalk up fantasy points that way, but in terms of his yardage totals weren't great. Michael Gallup didn't get a touchdown, but he had 9 receptions and 148 yards. Cobb had 4 receptions, 115 yards and a TD. There were fantasy points all around for Cowboys players, and it was just ridiculous. Our defense last season, you made it through the season with the expectation that the Lions' defense would be a strength of this team. Fast forward to this season, and right now they are the liability. Like, the offense with the backup quarterback is playing at a higher level than the defense, and that's alarming, especially when you have a coach that is a defensive specialist who's supposed to be this great defensive genius. It's worrisome, to say the least. So, I would like to say that Stafford being out potentially, I saw reports saying that he might be out for up to the next 6 weeks, potentially, depending on what the scans show this week. And really, if he's going to be missing more weeks, just shut him down for the season is my vote. Like, put him on IR, let him get healthy. I know he's also dealing with a hip injury at the same time. Like, we're going to need him next season. And my only concern is that, as well as the offense is playing this year, the defense was playing, we had the number one rush defense last year. Are we ever going to get these two sides of the ball going at the same time where they're playing at their peak levels? Because, the offense really seems to be clicking this season. It's hard to say if they'll be able to reproduce this productivity next season. And it's just a lot of uncertainty about the Lions' future. One thing that I'm pretty confident on, they're not mathematically eliminated, but I think it's pretty safe to say there won't be a postseason for the Lions, which is one of the reasons why I am in favor of sitting Matt Stafford. And Kartik, hello. Hope you're enjoying your first day back at work. I know you had yesterday, a faux day off, but hope today's going well for you. And yeah, there were a lot of missed tackles there, Jeffrey, and there were a couple of injuries that happened there too on the defensive side of things. Tracy Walker did leave that game with an injury. You also had Trey Flowers and Frank Ragnow were both being evaluated for concussions by the end of the game. Nick Baldwin, our fullback, left with a knee injury, and then Jamal Agnew left with an ankle injury. So, on top of the Stafford injuries, we're piling on some more there. On the Cowboys side of things, Lyle Collins did leave the game in the fourth quarter with a knee injury. The Cowboys, they get to go play with New England next week. The Lions get Washington, and, even if Stafford doesn't play next week, I do think the Lions have a chance of winning based off of what I've seen. Washington has not looked good. They turned it on a little bit towards the end of the game this week in their matchup, but prior to then, that offense wasn't doing a whole lot. But there in the fourth quarter against, I'm just trying to remember, who did they play this past week? Who did Washington play? I don't know, it's escaping me. But, until the fourth quarter of the game, they really didn't look like they were doing a whole lot, and then they sort of came alive there and put up some points in garbage time and some yardage. Darius Geis had a nice touchdown, which was good to see because, he's had the two season-ending injuries these last 2 years, which have really derailed him. But it was good to see him sort of get in the end zone and get back. They played the Jets this past week and lost 34-17. So the Jets definitely not a good team. Certainly an opportunity for the Lions, who will be playing that struggling Washington team, even if Stafford's not in there to get a win. It's I think the playoffs are out of reach. I think it's best to sit Stafford at this point. I haven't hated what I've seen out of Jeff Driscoll. Originally, I'm still on board with the camp of bringing in Colin Kaepernick to the Lions to see what he could potentially offer. I'm not, at this point, I want them to keep Jeff Driscoll as well, too, and evaluate those two sort of moving forward to see who will be the long-term backup QB, because so far through these two games, Jeff Driscoll hasn't by any means been great, but he's been serviceable, and the Lions' offense has scored points. So, I'm not too upset with what I've seen out of Jeff Driscoll. I think the defense has been the bigger factor in those losses. But at the same time, I think it would be interesting to see what Colin Kaepernick could bring to the table, and pairing him up with David Bevell could be very interesting to see what those two could come up with. But I'm still pro-Cap. I say you bring him in, you keep Jeff Driscoll, let David Blau go. I don't think David Blau is going to be the long-term backup solution. But be interesting to see if, keep Jeff Driscoll in here for a couple more weeks and then give Kaepernick a shot to see what he could bring to the table. Could be interesting to see how that unfolds. But, really not too surprising of a outcome there. Stafford was out. Cowboys, one of the best teams in the NFC, should have lost the game. It was kind of surprising they almost didn't lose the game. It's very surprising that they gave the Cowboys as hard of a time as they did. But again, really the thing that the sort of the thorn in the Lions' side is that defense. Even with Stafford in there, the offense is playing very well. Our defense struggles mightily, and it's really hard to beat good teams when you're not executing on both sides of the ball. And it's been the story of the Lions here in 2019. Taking a look at some of the other outcomes from around the league, another sort of surprising game, the Broncos and Vikings. The Broncos down 20 points at the end of the first half, coming back and winning that game 27-23. Certainly not a surprise that the Vikings win, but the fact they were down 20 to Denver and then somehow mustered up the strength to claw their way back and get that victory, that was pretty surprising. The fact that the 49ers... Not that the fact the 49ers beat the Cardinals, but the fact they did it with Jimmy Garoppolo leading the way, throwing the ball, especially with George Kittle out and Emmanuel Sanders beat up. That was a little surprising to see that it was the passing game there that led them the way. The Ravens, the smackdown they put on the Texans. I unfortunately went with the Texans in the Pick'em segment. Of course, they were my pick in preseason to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. After this week's game, those hopes for me are done. They are no longer my AFC Super Bowl team. The Ravens took those dreams and they beat them to death. That game was ugly. And then the Falcons, I don't know what happened during their bye week, but suddenly they've decided that they're going to play football again. And that 29-3 victory over the Panthers was pretty surprising. Forcing Kyle Allen to throw 4 interceptions and just coming out and dominating. It's one thing that Matt Ryan and that offense are playing better. You would expect Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. At some point, they're going to get things going. Calvin Ridley, yes, they did lose Austin Hooper, but you would expect that sooner or later that offense would get rolling because they're too good not to. But their defense coming out of nowhere and enforcing those 4 takeaways against the Panthers just... I don't know. This is 2 weeks. They beat the Saints. They've beaten the Panthers now. Really, if I'm a team, I don't want any part of the Falcons. I doubt they're going to make the playoffs, but they seem hell-bent on ruining other people's seasons as well. So if you have to play the Falcons, it's not gonna, it seems like it's not going to be a good time because suddenly they've figured things out and they look like a team to be reckoned with. So, yeah. It was sort of a very interesting week here in the NFL. The outcomes, nothing really too shocking. Again, I think the only thing that most people might be shocked by in terms of the final scores, again, just the point difference there between the Ravens and the Texans, that's a little surprising. The fact the Falcons hammered the Panthers, and then I guess maybe the fact the Browns beat the Steelers, because the Browns have kind of been dysfunctional, and the Steelers finding ways to win games, and then, 21-7 the final score there. Kind of surprising, but otherwise, everyone else pretty much handling business as expected. Of course, tonight is the matchup in the AFC West, the Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers facing off in Mexico. I know I need a little bit of help with fantasy football in terms of my opponent's players not scoring points, but should be a good end to this Week 11 and set us up nicely as we take a look here in Week 12. The Lions will be playing Washington, as mentioned. We'll talk about who else the other NFC North teams will be playing during tomorrow's episode of Kings in the North, our weekly check-in with the NFC North. And really at this point, Packers probably have that throne locked up, but it's going to be interesting here in Week 12. They do have a matchup with those 49ers, so could be a very, very good, there's really a lot of good games coming up here in Week 12. You got the Packers and the 49ers, you got the Cowboys and the Patriots. There's going to be some good matchups here. You got the Texans and the Colts vying for the lead in the AFC South. Going to be some good things. Eagles and Seahawks, good games. But we'll cover those later on in the week. If you did enjoy today's show, please do help the channel grow. Best ways you can help us out are by 1, liking this video, and by number 2, if you haven't done so yet, please do consider subscribing to the channel. We have a goal of reaching 100 subscribers so we can unlock a custom URL for the YouTube channel. We're making great progress towards that, but we still need a little bit of help. So if you haven't done so, please do consider subscribing. I'm Kevin Marheine. This has been the Lions Grid. We will catch you during tomorrow's Kings in the North video. And until then, have a good night, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.